and make it new, but his same songs, but looking at them again. And
Streisand has always been known for her immense talent, strong opinions, and unwavering presence in the entertainment industry. Now at 83, she's not afraid to tell it like it is, especially when it comes to the music world. In a recent candid conversation, the iconic singer and actress opened up about the 7 musicians she simply couldn't stand working with. Whether due to clashing egos, artistic differences, or just plain bad chemistry, these names made Streisand's blacklist, and her reasons are as sharp as ever. 1. Frank Sinatra. Though both were giants of their era, Streisand revealed that Sinatra's domineering studio presence made collaboration unbearable. He'd walk in and expect everything to revolve around him, no room for compromise, she said. It was more about control than craft. Streisand acknowledged Sinatra's influence and vocal prowess, saying she admired his early work, particularly in the 1950s. His phrasing, his timing, no one could touch that, she admitted. But admiration doesn't always translate to compatibility. Their musical paths crossed during various industry events and benefits, and there was always talk, usually from record executives, of bringing them together for a duet. According to Streisand, those talks would start strong and fall apart almost immediately. The problem, she said, wasn't just personal friction, it was philosophical. Frank believed in capturing raw emotion in 1 or 2 takes tops, Streisand explained. He didn't understand my process. I like rehearsing, fine-tuning. He thought that was overproducing. I thought he was rushing brilliance. When they attempted a joint recording session in the early 70s, things soured quickly. Streisand recalled that Sinatra showed up late, dismissed the arrangement she'd prepared, and insisted on changing the key on the spot. He barely glanced at the charts. It was like he expected the music to mold itself around him, she said. And when I pushed back gently, he acted like I'd committed some offense. It wasn't even about ego, she said. It was about dominance. He needed to prove he was in charge. That's not art, that's theater. And not the good kind. She claimed he refused to harmonize on one section of the track, muttering that it wasn't his style, and stormed out of the studio before they could finish a full take. The session was never revisited. Streisand also mentioned the subtle sexism she experienced in Sinatra's presence. He was old school in a way that didn't age well, she said. There were little comments about my voice, my looks, my being difficult, that wouldn't have been said to a man. It wore me down. She added that working with him often felt like stepping back in time, into an era where female ambition was seen as a threat, not a strength. Even off stage, their temperaments clashed. At one gala in the late 60s, Streisand recalled a tense moment when Sinatra referred to her political activism as Hollywood noise. He had no patience for anything he didn't agree with, she said. If you weren't in his corner, you were dismissed. She remembered him being charming when it suited him but quick to turn cold if challenged. Despite the disappointments, Streisand made it clear that she holds no grudges, just firm boundaries. Some people don't mix, she said simply. And Frank and I, we were oil and water. Iconic, yes. But combustible. 2. Elvis Presley. While she once considered him for a role in A Star is Born, Streisand later admitted their brief interactions were deeply disappointing. She found Presley overly managed and emotionally distant, calling their conversations like talking to a wax figure. In the early 1970s, Barbra Streisand and her then-partner, producer John Peters, had ambitious plans for a remake of A Star is Born, a film that would eventually feature Kris Kristofferson. But before Kristofferson came into the picture, Streisand had her sights set on the biggest star in America, Elvis Presley. At the time, the idea seemed electrifying, pairing the reigning king of rock and roll with one of the most powerful female voices in entertainment. The media buzzed with speculation, and meetings were arranged. According to Streisand, the first meeting with Presley was at the Las Vegas Hilton, where he was performing a residency. I was excited, she said. I thought this was a chance to do something truly historic. A reinvention for him and a bold step for me. But the reality of meeting Presley was a letdown. He was surrounded by his Memphis Mafia, those bodyguards and handlers who spoke for him more than he did. You couldn't get through to him without going through them. It was like trying to talk to a prince who forgot how to speak. What struck Streisand most was Presley's lack of engagement. He barely made eye contact, she recalled. He nodded a lot, smiled politely, but it was as if he was checked out, emotionally, mentally. There was no fire in him, no vision, just compliance, she described. Feeling an eerie disconnect, as if the legend had become a shadow of himself. It felt like he was playing the role of Elvis instead of being Elvis. I was looking for a partner, someone who could challenge and inspire me. But he was already buried under the weight of his own myth. She also noted that his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, dominated the conversation and made increasingly outlandish demands for salary, billing, and creative control. I remember thinking this isn't a partnership, it's a hostage negotiation, Streisand said. The colonel reportedly wanted full control over Presley's image and wardrobe in the film, even insisting he sing only songs written or approved by Parker's publishing house. It was suffocating, Streisand explained. Elvis wasn't allowed to be Elvis anymore, let alone the kind of vulnerable, raw character the role required. Despite her disappointment, Streisand expressed deep empathy for Presley. I think he was trapped, she said. By fame, by addiction, by the people around him. It wasn't entirely his fault, but he wasn't capable or allowed to be a collaborator. And without that connection, it just wasn't going to work. She admitted she had once envisioned scenes of emotional depth and musical magic, the kind of work that could have reshaped his image and re-energized his career. But the reality didn't match the dream. Ultimately, Streisand moved on, casting Christopherson in a role that reignited his film career. Looking back, she doesn't regret not working with Elvis, only the lost potential. It could have been beautiful, she said. But you can't build anything when the other person isn't really there. 3. David Bowie. Barbra admired Bowie's artistry from afar but found him impossible in person. He was enigmatic to a fault, she shared. Every time we tried to collaborate, it felt like he was speaking in riddles, no foundation for real connection. Streisand had long respected David Bowie's ability to reinvent himself, from Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke, and she admired his willingness to push artistic boundaries. He was fearless with his image, with his sound, she said. You could never pin him down, and that was thrilling to watch as an outsider. Naturally, when an opportunity came in the late 70s to potentially collaborate on a genre-defying duet for a television special, Streisand was intrigued. She believed it could be something boundary-breaking, a rare fusion of glam rock eccentricity and Broadway polish. It wasn't just about making music, she said. It was about creating a moment, something nobody would see coming. Their first meeting took place in London at a quiet, art-filled cafe Bowie had handpicked. Streisand was expecting a conversation about music arrangements and mutual vision. What she got, she said, was something more like a philosophy seminar led by someone who didn't believe in clocks. According to her, Bowie was charming but elusive, speaking in broad metaphors and abstract ideas. I asked about tempo, and he responded with a quote about time being an illusion. I wanted to talk melody. He asked if I believed in parallel dimensions. It was dazzling, but exhausting. She noted that while Bowie's mind was brilliant, it didn't always tether to practical collaboration. She recounted that the real challenge came when they got into the studio to test a track. Streisand came prepared, lyrics annotated, vocal cues planned, while Bowie preferred to improvise everything. He didn't want to rehearse, she said. He wanted to feel the room and let the moment dictate the melody. That's beautiful in theory, but when you're trying to shape a song together, it becomes chaos. He also reportedly kept changing musical direction mid-session, switching moods, instruments, and themes without warning. One moment he wanted synth-pop, the next it was ambient jazz, she said. It was like chasing a balloon in the wind. Despite Bowie's undeniable charisma and vocal talent, Streisand found the experience frustratingly abstract. I need connection, she said. I need to look across the room and see someone who's meeting me halfway. With Bowie, I felt like I was chasing shadows. She also hinted that their creative styles were too fundamentally different to coexist. I'm grounded, I need structure. He was floating, poetic, but untethered. After a few sessions, the collaboration was quietly dropped. Nothing was officially recorded, and both artists moved on without public comment. Even so, Streisand insists she never disliked Bowie personally. He was a genius in his own right, she said. But not everyone's genius plays well with others. With David, I never felt anchored. I was trying to build a bridge, and he was designing a spaceship. She later admitted that while the collaboration failed, it left her with a strange sort of respect. Sometimes the most brilliant minds aren't meant to meet in the middle, they're meant to orbit separately, shining in their own way. 4. Miles Davis. Though she acknowledged his genius, Streisand called working with Davis a total disaster. She cited his dismissive attitude and lack of interest in anything outside jazz as major roadblocks. He didn't care what I brought to the table, she said. It was his way or silence. Barbra Streisand has always had deep respect for musical innovators, and Miles Davis was no exception. She called him a revolutionary and credited his fearless creativity with changing the sound of modern music. His influence is everywhere, in phrasing, in mood, in how people think about space and rhythm, she said. But when their paths crossed in a proposed recording collaboration in the late 1980s, the mutual respect quickly gave way to a fundamental creative clash. The project was originally pitched by a prominent producer who thought the pairing of Streisand's soaring theatrical voice with Davis's moody trumpet would break new ground. Streisand was open to the idea, curious to explore a more improvisational jazz sound. I was excited, she recalled. I thought, what if we created something cinematic, a dialogue between voice and horn? Their first session, however, set the tone for what would become an uphill battle. Streisand arrived with sheet music, vocal charts, and a detailed sense of arrangement. Davis, in contrast, showed up late, barely acknowledged anyone in the room, and declined to look at any of the materials prepared. He barely said 10 words, Streisand remembered. He looked at the charts, shook his head and said, "We don't need that." That was it. What followed was, in her words, an awkward standoff disguised as a jam session. Davis played a few bars that felt completely disconnected from her vocal cues, and when she tried to adjust her approach to match his phrasing, he abruptly stopped playing. It was like trying to sing into a void, she said. He wasn't reacting, he wasn't engaging, just playing what he felt like and expecting the rest of us to keep up. Streisand noted that there was no room for communication or compromise. I'd ask, do you want to try a different key? Should I follow your lead on tempo? He'd just shrug or turn away. It wasn't shyness, it was dismissal. The worst part, she explained, wasn't the disconnection, it was the disdain. He made it clear I was out of my element. There was no encouragement, no collaboration, just silence or an eye roll. Streisand said she tried repeatedly to bridge the gap, suggesting they find common ground by exploring Gershwin or Cole Porter, composers they both admired. Davis, she claimed, dismissed the idea, saying he was done with that. Museum music. Even attempts to connect between takes failed. I tried to strike up small talk or ask about his influences, and he'd either ignore me or mumble something cryptic, she said. He didn't want connection, he wanted control or nothing. Their final meeting ended without a handshake or even a goodbye. He got up mid-take, packed his horn and left, Streisand said. I stood there, still singing, still hoping to connect, but the door closed, and that was that. Looking back, Streisand still considers Davis a legend, but not a collaborator. He was in his own world, she said. Brilliant, yes, but unreachable. And when someone refuses to meet you halfway, you stop walking toward them. She added that while the experience stung at the time, it also taught her a valuable lesson. Even shared genius can't overcome a lack of mutual respect. Greatness doesn't guarantee harmony, she said. And sometimes, reverence from a distance is the only kind that works. 5. Prince. The pair reportedly explored a duet in the late 80s, but Streisand said Prince's secrecy and unpredictability quickly shut the idea down. "He was brilliant but impossible to schedule or pin down," she recalled. "Collaboration was like chasing a ghost." Barbra Streisand had long been fascinated by Prince's musical genius, his boundary-pushing style, his mastery of multiple instruments, and his genre-defying songwriting all made him a figure of intrigue. "He was electric," she said. "He could take funk, rock, R&B, gospel, blend them together and make something you've never heard before. I admired that fearlessness." That admiration led to conversations in the late 1980s about a potential duet. At the time, Streisand was experimenting with new sounds and collaborators, and Prince was riding high on the success of Sign o' the Times. The idea was to record a haunting, slow-tempo ballad that combined orchestral flourishes with Prince's signature funk-infused grooves, something that could bridge their worlds. "We spoke on the phone a few times," Streisand recalled. "He had a soft voice, almost a whisper. He'd talk in riddles, like he was half poet, half mystic. I remember hanging up the phone wondering if we'd actually had a conversation or if I dreamed it." When it came to planning, things unraveled quickly. Streisand, known for her detailed preparation and perfectionist standards, attempted to coordinate logistics. She offered potential studio times, proposed locations, even sent a rough draft of a lyrical theme. Prince responded days, sometimes weeks later, often with cryptic notes, or audio snippets that bore little connection to the original plan. "He'd send me a cassette tape with no label, no instructions, just a soundscape. Ambient noises, maybe a line of vocals. It was beautiful, but what was I supposed to do with it?" she said. "It was like collaborating with someone who was already halfway through a dream." Things reached a breaking point when Streisand's team booked a session at Sunset Sound in LA, and Prince simply didn't show up. No call, no cancellation, just silence. He later claimed he was in the middle of something spiritual and couldn't be disturbed. Streisand took it as a sign. "I realized then, you don't collaborate with Prince. You orbit him. And I don't orbit anybody." She never stopped admiring his brilliance, but she also made peace with the fact that they were incompatible. "Prince was a world unto himself," she said. "Incredible visionary but completely untouchable. I needed a partner. He was a phenomenon." 6. Eric Clapton. Despite Clapton's guitar legend status, Streisand said his lack of enthusiasm for her style made things difficult. "He didn't hide his disinterest," she said. "You could feel the eye rolls in the room. We were on different planets." The possibility of working with Eric Clapton arose in the early 1990s when Streisand was experimenting with more acoustic textures and organic production for an upcoming album. Clapton's name came up frequently in those conversations, not just because of his mastery of the guitar, but because his tone and phrasing could bring a raw, soulful edge to a song. "I'd always admired his guitar work," Streisand said. "His emotion, the way he bent a note to tell a story, it was beautiful. But admiration doesn't always translate into chemistry." They were introduced through mutual friends in the industry and a tentative session was arranged in Los Angeles. From the start, Streisand said, Clapton appeared detached. "He came in late, sunglasses on, barely said hello," she recalled. "He was polite enough, but you could tell, his body was there, his mind wasn't." Streisand had prepared a reimagined ballad she thought would suit his style, something bluesy, with room for guitar improvisation. But according to her, Clapton barely glanced at the sheet music and declined to rehearse. He said, "Just play the track. I'll figure it out." Which can work, if there's energy, if there's curiosity, but he seemed bored before the first note. As they began recording, the distance between their approaches became more obvious. Clapton played with his usual technical brilliance, but his phrasing often clashed with Streisand's vocal lines. She tried adjusting her delivery, offering feedback and suggestions, but got little in return. He wasn't rude, but he wasn't present either. He'd nod, shrug, maybe play something vaguely similar, but the conversation just wasn't there. Music is dialogue, and this was monologue. After a few takes, it became clear the collaboration wasn't working. Streisand recalled a particular moment where Clapton let out a loud sigh after another suggested retake. "It wasn't subtle," she said. "He was ready to go before we'd even started." Later, she learned through a producer that Clapton had expressed skepticism about the project from the beginning, reportedly saying her music wasn't really his thing. "That stung a little," Streisand admitted. "Not because he didn't like my work, that's fine. But if you don't want to be there, don't show up." In the end, none of the material from the session made it onto the final album. Streisand remains gracious about the experience, but also realistic. "We're both artists," she said, "but we speak different musical languages. He's blues and smoke, I'm orchestration and light. Sometimes those elements blend. This time they repelled." 7. Madonna. Possibly the most infamous name on the list, Streisand described Madonna as abrasive, unfiltered, and competitive to the point of absurdity. Though fans dreamed of a duet, Streisand said it was never an option. "We're both strong women," she concluded. "But there's a difference between strength and steamrolling." Barbra Streisand and Madonna have long represented two very different poles of female power in the music industry. Streisand, rooted in theatrical tradition and vocal precision, built her career on nuance, depth, and artistic control. Madonna, by contrast, exploded into pop culture with provocation, reinvention, and sheer force of will. "We were never in the same lane," Streisand said, "and we were never trying to be." The media has speculated for decades about a supposed rivalry, often fueled by comparisons and the occasional barbed comment, but Streisand said it was more than just tabloids. There were real tensions behind the scenes. "We were pitched several ideas over the years, a duet, a joint appearance, even a co-hosted benefit," she revealed. "Every time it came up I said no. Not because I was intimidated, but because I knew it would be a disaster." The few times they did meet, Streisand described the encounters as uncomfortable, even antagonistic. "Madonna doesn't filter herself, and that's fine, that's her brand, but it can come off as disrespectful," she said. "She once called me too precious for pop right to my face, like it was a compliment. It wasn't." Streisand recalled a private industry dinner in the early 90s where things came to a head. "She showed up late, loud, and made a point to critique everyone's work, including mine. There's a way to be bold without being brash." She hadn't learned that yet. Artistically, Streisand said there was never a chance for harmony between them. "Our approaches couldn't be more different. I rehearse. I plan. I care about the structure. Madonna thrives in shock and spontaneity. There's little room for collaboration when the foundation is that mismatched." Despite the tension, Streisand didn't deny Madonna's influence or impact. "She's a powerhouse. She carved her own path and never apologized for it. I respect that. But respect doesn't mean compatibility. I could admire her hustle and still know we'd make terrible music together." When asked if she ever regretted not teaming up with Madonna, Streisand didn't hesitate. "Not once," she said. "Some forces just don't belong in the same room. We're both strong women, yes, but one builds, the other bulldozes." As always, Streisand remains unapologetically herself, fearless in her reflections and fiercely protective of her artistry. At 83, she's earned the right to say exactly what she thinks, and she clearly has no intention of holding back.